Hey everybody, my name's Kira, and today I'm going to be teaching you about my educational giant, Catharine Beecher. Let's get started. Catharine Beecher was born in 1800 in East Hampton, New York. She was part of the prominent Beecher family. Her father was Dr. Lyman Beecher, who was a preacher during the Second Great Awakening, and her sister, one of her most prominent sister, was Harriet Beecher Stowe, who of course wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin and was just absolutely huge in the abolitionist movement. Many of her siblings were also suffragists, and although this may not seem important now, it definitely is later, so I feel just hold on to that knowledge. Her mother died when she was 16, and although of course this was a tragedy, it did give her the opportunity to run her father's household. And once again, this is knowledge that seems very unimportant, but it is important later, so just hold on to that. So some of the influences on her belief was her close relationship with her father, who encouraged his children to think outside of society's norms and really act on them. Another influence was that she studied at the Litchfield Female Academy and was taught by the prominent Sarah Pierce, who felt as though women's education was very important. She was the one who opened the Litchfield Female Academy, which was one of the first academies of its kind. And although Catharine did spend most of her studies as just studying independently, this time that she spent at Litchfield really helped shape her belief. It really helped to shape her belief, and which is very influential on her. And finally, what I feel to be one of the most important influences on her feelings on education was her relationship with the Yale professor Alexander Fisher. They were very much in love and were engaged to be married, but unfortunately they never were able to be married as Fisher died in a shipwreck accident. And of course, Catharine was overcome with grief, and so she went to live with his family. And because she was just in such deep mourning, his brother, recognizing her love for education and her love of learning, he taught her mathematics in order to kind of get her mind off of everything. And apparently she felt as though this worked because she vowed that she would then spend the rest of her life devoted to educating other women. And although this did originally start because it helped take her mind off of everything, she was institutionalized many times throughout her lifetime, so she still remained in poor mental health, unfortunately. So this tragedy, although horrible for her, led to a lot of good, and I think we need to see it in that light. So her beliefs on education, as you might have figured from some of my hints, she believed that women should receive an education, and she was a huge proponent for women education. However, she did not feel as though women should receive an education in order to take the place of men in society or to become equal to men in certain regards. Rather, she felt as though by educating women, society was better able to teach its youth. She felt as though motherhood and teaching was one of the most important jobs, that above doctors and lawyers, and so therefore she felt as though women should be educated in order to properly teach the next generation of doctors, lawyers, politicians, in order to keep American democracy alive and in order to keep American society educated and intelligent. And I thought this was a really cool outlook on it because I believe also that, it's very important that we as women accept our role as mothers and as teachers and really strive to give our children the best education possible. And so I really appreciated this view that she had. In addition, she felt that she did not support the suffragist movement. She believed, as I mentioned before, that it's not that they weren't equal to men, but she accepted that they had a different role, which is of course what we teach in the LDS Church. And so she felt as though voting and politics weren't part of that role. She felt as though if a woman could teach her child to be an educated, young man, for instance, that he would have the opportunity eventually to vote, and that through that she could also support the American democracy. Finally, she believed that it was important that women receive more than just the superficial knowledge that they received during her time. She recognized that if women only received the superficial knowledge, that they could not be proper runners of their households, and that they could not properly teach their children, because of course if one does not have an extensive education, then they cannot teach someone what they do not know. And so that was really her view on the matter. So because she had such strong beliefs concerning women's education, she opened the Hartfield Female Seminary in 1823 with her sister Mary. It began with only 7 students and just her and her sister teaching. But eventually, due to donations and the popularity of her school, she was able to expand it to over 100 students and 8 teachers, which she really appreciated, because each teacher was able to have a very extensive knowledge in their personal subject, giving their students a completely in-depth knowledge, unlike that superficial knowledge that Catharine feared. During that time, Catharine actually wrote textbooks for her school and others which strove to emulate her school and the extensive teachings that young ladies were able to receive there. In fact, actually, many of the ladies that graduated from her school went on to teach at other schools that emulated it. However, although it was a huge success, Catharine felt as though the women in the West needed educated as well, and left the school in very capable hands in 1832 to go open the Western Female Institute in Ohio. Now, unfortunately, this was kind of a failure due to the depression of the country at that time, as well as Catharine's support of the abolitionist movement. Ohio was kind of split on slavery and its views, so many of the people didn't trust her. And finally, there just weren't a huge amount of affluent patrons for Catharine to teach. It wasn't because Ohio was still developing. There just weren't a huge amount of young ladies that needed educating, and so that kind of slowed her down. And eventually, she did have to close the school. I believe it was in 1837. So after that, she didn't give up on her goal to educate women, and she went to write textbooks for the McGuffey readers, which became one of the first nationally adopted readers for elementary students. So I thought that was really cool. And after that, she went on to establish the American Women's Educational Association in 1852. Now, I say on my PowerPoint that this had mixed results. Really, it was a success. Its goal was to educate young women and make them ready and good educated teachers in order to educate the children of the Western frontier, and to make them able to establish their own schools in the West. And it really was very successful. It did send many teachers out and did establish many schools that became pretty influential. However, Catharine felt as though it should have been a bigger success, and so because of that, she marked it as a failure, unfortunately. However, after viewing it as a failure, she did continue to speak for women's education, and she really did this throughout her life. Now, some of the ways that she was most influential, besides her establishments and aside from speaking and teaching young women, she also was able to spread her word to everyone by way of the written word. She wrote many essays and books, over 21 in fact, and I've listed only a couple here. I'm not going to go over all of them because they really all generally have the same theme. Catharine felt as though women needed to receive an education, and so that's what she spoke about in her works. She spoke of the superficial knowledge that women received at the time and how they needed a deeper knowledge. She spoke of the importance of good housekeeping and why women needed to learn how to become, why women needed to become educated in order to become good wives and good housekeepers, which she knew quite a bit about due to the year of running her family's household when she was only 16. She never remarried, but just even that short experience gave her huge insights into the knowledge that a woman must have in order to be an effective head of household. In addition, she also spoke of the importance of women raising up democratic children and teachers teaching their students of American democracy in order to uphold democracy and the American standard. And so that was really about what she wrote about. She did write, a wide variety of books. She had recipe books even, but this was generally what her focus was on. Now, her effects on education. Of course, an obvious effect is that more women received an education due to her efforts. More women became teachers due to her efforts. And I don't know about the rest of you, but when I think of women, teaching, I generally view it as a woman's job, and that was due to her efforts. She introduced physical education for women in her Hartford female school, and because of her many works concerning the importance of women learning for domestic reasons, she also helped to introduce domestic sciences into American curriculum. Now, these were all very amazing influences, and she had even more, I'm sure, that I'm overlooking. But unfortunately, one negative aspect of her work was because so many people look down upon womanhood and motherhood, especially now in our society, people began to even more look down on teaching as a profession. It already wasn't a job that people glorified, but even though I feel as though teaching is more important than being a doctor or being a lawyer, and even though Catherine felt that way too, people did not honor it as she wished. And so I hate to leave on a negative note, but that was also one, I think, very important aspect of her life work. So I hope that you guys can see past that and really respect Catherine, and I hope that you kind of look her up more because she has a lot of really great quotes and great thoughts and ideas concerning women's education. And I guess I leave that all with you to ponder about, and I'll see you guys all later.